Hey guys, this is Miss Checka. I am in front of the Tower of London in London, England. It's a little intense, you guys, a little intense. First of all, the site is a little kitschy. They're very jokey, cutesy, oh, off with their head. But the fact is, like, that was a place where at least 10 people were beheaded. Other people were tortured. People were imprisoned. Stuff went down in the Tower of London. For me personally, it was really interesting to go visit inside because when I'm in Texas and I'm reading about it, it's really confusing. Like, is this place a fortress? Is it a palace? Why are people being imprisoned there? I don't get it. And seeing it in person, I learned that, like, oh, it's all of those things. So the Tower of London has been around since over 1,000 years, basically. Even back towards the Roman occupation of London, there was a building there, and then in the Middle Ages they built a huge fortress with the moat, big yard, walls around it, whole 9 yards. And then over the centuries, different kings and queens have expanded onto it, built more towers, built buildings and houses around it. It kind of crumbled and was in disrepair in the 1800s, but in the 1800s, people were really into romanticizing knights and ladies, So they built new buildings to look like old buildings. It's confusing. Point being, we're just going to concentrate on kind of like the 1600s. Oh my God. A lot of people were sent there for a list of reasons that really honestly has boggled my mind. So some people were prisoners of conscience, right? So England is all Catholic, then there's the Reformation, and then England becomes Protestant. So there were people in there who were imprisoned for being Catholic. There were people in there who were imprisoned for being Protestant. There were people in there imprisoned because they just made somebody mad. I mean, Sir Walter Raleigh was in there for years, and he was in there not once, not two, not twice, 3 different times he's in prison in the Tower of London. And the first time was because he married somebody without asking Queen Elizabeth I before marrying her. And guys, I love Queen Elizabeth I. Also, she was in prison in there by her older sister, Bloody Mary / Mary Tudor. So it's not like she didn't know what an awful place that was to be. But she imprisoned him. The prisoners lived under different conditions, right? So if you were a royal, you get treated pretty nicely. If you're an aristocrat, like for instance, Sir Walter Raleigh got to have his wife. His wife actually had their last child there. If you weren't, pretty crappy conditions. One of the things that kind of freaked me out in there is that there's no cells, right? It was never built on purpose to be a prison. It's just that when you needed a place to stash a prisoner, they would cram people in different rooms. Well, the walls inside are covered in carvings from prisoners. I mean, not like here, Miss Checka was here. I mean, like, some of the carvings are this far deep into the walls. Elaborate pictures, prayers, Christian symbols. One guy was in there in prison for being a magician, and he made like all of these astrological symbols. And it was kind of like, guy, you are not helping yourself with the magic symbols. You know what I mean? Whatever. And you can kind of see the psychological torment that people were under because, some of them knew that they weren't getting out of there alive. Some of them got tortured. So some of the things that they're saying, they would write letters, please let me out of here. It's pretty intense. There's also very sad ironies. For instance, 2 of Henry VIII's wives, 2 of them were imprisoned and beheaded here. And one of them, Anne Boleyn, so I said it was also a palace, right? So when she married Henry VIII, they had celebrations all over London. They actually renovated a whole bunch of buildings, including this one because it was a royal palace. They had a beautiful room for her. A couple of years later, when he decides that he doesn't want to be married to her anymore because he's going to marry her cousin, Jane Seymour. He had her imprisoned in the tower. He puts her on trial for adultery, and when she goes in, she asks, where am I going to stay? And they said, oh, don't worry, we're going to put you in the same room. So in the exact same room she stayed before her coronation, that's where she stayed before they executed her, which is terrible. And the last story is the one of the princes in the tower, which is just, this is a story that I know from Shakespeare, and I think I've seen it so many times and I've read it that I kind of forgot. No, those were actual kids. So there was this king, Edward. Edward died, and when he died, he had 2 sons. So logically, the 2 sons should have inherited the throne. And because they were kids, it was tradition that you would have a regent, you know, an adult, maybe an uncle, maybe your mom, whatever, to rule until you came of age. Well, their uncle Richard said, oh, I'll be the regent. Why don't we put them in London? Take them to London, right in the center of things. Oh, they're in London. Why don't we put them in the tower for their safety? Then he had them declared illegitimate, which means that they wouldn't have been able to inherit the throne. And then just nobody heard of them anymore. I mean, like, physically, people used to see them running around. Like, I'm on the street and you can see the tower behind me. You would be able to see people walking up and down the walls. Well, people used to see the kids, the 2 princes, walking up and down, and then they just didn't. They were gone, and nobody knows for sure what happened to them. 200 years later, in the 1600s, somebody discovered under a staircase a chest, and it had the skeletons of 2 boys, and they were taken out of the chest. They were buried in Westminster Abbey. Actually, modern forensics has determined that the skeletons were of like 2 10 and 12-year-old boys, which is roughly the age of the princes. So who knows what happened to them? Shakespeare definitely put it, he blamed their uncle Richard, who became Richard III. On a happier note, that's where they keep the crowns and the crown jewels, so that's fun. I'm a little traumatized. So anyway, Tower of London, palace, fortress, place where you keep fancy jewelry, imprisonment, lots of beheadings, and I just think it's really strange to spend the afternoon seeing people's carving where they're like, I've been here this many days, I've been here these many hours, and now, guys, I stood in a line, I paid admission to go in. Like, if you come to London, you can pay money to be in the same room where people were desperate to get out. It's a strange thing to think about. Last note, there's also it's a pretty strong statement if you are the king or queen of England to stick a fortress in the middle of your capital city. All right. So if you really want a show of power over your populace, stick a huge fortress in it, and it's just a silent everyday statement of like, I'm the king, I have army, do whatever I want. So I'm just saying, if you're gonna become a monarch and I was your citizen, that would definitely freak me out. Do that. All right, let's check it out.